The little boy screamed the word, loud enough for the entire diner to hear. Freak! 8-year-old Ethan Walker froze. His hand, the one without the scars, gripped his father's sleeve. His breathing became rapid, shallow, panicked. Then, he ran. He dove under the nearest booth, curling into a ball, his scarred arm wrapped around his head, his body shaking with silent sobs. If you have ever been judged for something you couldn't control, if you have ever hidden from a world that seemed determined to hurt you, then this story is for you. David Walker stood frozen in the middle of the diner. 3 years of progress, 3 years of therapy with the best child psychologists, 3 years of slowly, painfully coaxing his son out of his shell. Gone, in a single word. The mother of the child who had screamed was apologizing profusely, pulling her son away, her face red with embarrassment. But the damage was done. Every eye in the diner was on them. On the booth Ethan was hiding under. On David, the famous tech entrepreneur, standing helpless while his child fell apart. David moved toward the booth, but his legs felt like they were made of lead. What could he say? What could he do? He had spent 3 years trying to protect Ethan from exactly this moment, and he had failed. Then, a woman appeared. She did not approach Ethan directly. She did not try to coax him out or tell him everything was okay. Instead, she did something completely unexpected. She crawled under the booth with him. "Hello," she said softly, settling herself on the floor. "Mind if I join you down here?" Ethan's tear-streaked face lifted slightly. His mask, the one he always wore in public, had slipped, revealing the scars that covered the left side of his face, burns that had healed but would never fade, marks that told the story of the worst night of his life. The woman did not flinch, did not look away, did not pretend not to see. "I'm Sarah," she said. "What's your name?" Ethan did not answer. He just stared at her with wide, terrified eyes. "That's okay," Sarah said. "You don't have to talk. You know what I like to do when I'm scared?" Ethan shook his head slightly. "I dance," Sarah said. And then, right there under the diner booth, she started moving. Just small movements at first. A wiggle of her fingers, a shake of her shoulders, a silly face that made her look ridiculous. Ethan's tears slowed. He watched her with confused fascination. "Want to try?" Sarah asked. "Just move your fingers, like this." She wiggled her fingers again, exaggerated, silly, like she was playing piano on invisible keys. Ethan hesitated. Then, slowly, his right hand lifted. His fingers moved. Just a little. "Perfect," Sarah whispered like he had just done something amazing. "Now shoulders, like this." She shimmied her shoulders in the cramped space under the booth. Ethan watched. Then his shoulders moved too, just barely. "You're a natural," Sarah said with a grin. They sat under that booth for 10 minutes and dancing their silly, cramped little dance. And slowly, so slowly. The terror in Ethan's eyes faded. When David finally knelt down to look under the booth, he found his son moving his arms in a ridiculous wave motion, following the lead of a woman he had never met. A woman who was smiling at Ethan like he was the most normal kid in the world. "I think the coast is clear," Sarah said to Ethan. "Want to come out now?" Ethan looked at his father, then back at Sarah, then, still holding her hand. He crawled out from under the booth. David's eyes were wet. He had not seen Ethan voluntarily touch a stranger in 3 years. "Thank you," he said to Sarah, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what to say." "Thank you." Sarah stood up, brushing off her diner apron. "No thanks needed, I work here. This is my section." and I take care of everyone in my section." She looked at Ethan and winked. "Especially the good dancers. For the first time in years." Ethan almost smiled. "What would you have done in Sarah's position? Would you have crawled under that booth? Leave your answer in the comments below." David Walker had not planned to come to this diner. He had not planned to come anywhere for 3 years. Since the fire that killed his wife and scarred his son, David had kept Ethan hidden from the world. Homeschooling, private child psychologists, private everything. The only people Ethan saw were staff members who had been carefully vetted and trained. But Ethan's child psychologist had insisted. "He needs to interact with the real world," she had said. "He cannot heal in isolation. You have to try." So David had tried. A small family diner on the outskirts of the city. Quiet. Low-key. Nothing like the upscale establishments he usually frequented, and for the first 20 minutes, it had been fine. Ethan had been nervous but managing. He had ordered his own food. He had even looked around the room a few times. Then that child had seen his face. Freak. One word. That was all it took. Now David sat in a booth with Ethan, watching his son eat a milkshake with the strange waitress sitting across from them. He had not invited her to sit. She had simply slid into the booth after bringing Ethan's sundae and started asking questions. "So, what's your favorite thing to do?" she asked Ethan. Ethan glanced at his father, uncertain. David nodded encouragingly. "I like to read," Ethan said quietly. It was more words than he usually spoke to strangers in a month. "Really? What kind of books?" "Science fiction," Ethan said. "About space and robots." "That's so cool," Sarah said with genuine enthusiasm. "My daughter loves books about space too. She's only 4, so we read picture books. But her favorite is this one about a little girl who goes to the moon." "You have a daughter?" Ethan asked. "I do. Her name is Madison. She has special eyes. One is blue and one is green. Some people think it's weird, but I think it makes her magical." Ethan considered this. "People think I'm weird too," he said softly. "Because of my face." As David's heart clenched, Sarah leaned forward. "Can I tell you a secret?" Ethan nodded. "Weird is just a word people use when they don't understand something," Sarah said. "And most people don't understand very much, so they call a lot of things weird. But you know what I think?" "What?" "I think the things people call weird are usually the most interesting things in the world. Like Madison's eyes, like your face, like the fact that I just danced under a diner booth with someone I just met." She grinned. "Weird is just another word for special, and special is pretty great." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My grandma always told me that I was special." David closed his eyes. The pain of hearing his son talk about Sarah was still sharp, even after 3 years. "She sounds like a smart lady," Sarah said softly. "She was," Ethan said. "She died in a fire. That's how I got my scars." The words hung in the air. David had never heard Ethan tell anyone about the fire voluntarily, not even his child psychologist. "I am really sorry," Sarah said. "Losing your mom must be so hard." "It is," Ethan agreed. "But Dad says she's still with me, watching from somewhere." "I believe that," Sarah said. "I really do." She reached out and gently touched Ethan's scarred hand. He flinched at first, then relaxed. "Your scars aren't something to hide," she said. "They're part of your story, and your story is important." David watched this exchange with something close to wonder. In 3 years, no one had gotten through to Ethan like this. Not the child psychologists, not the specialists, not even David himself sometimes. Just a waitress in a family diner who had crawled under a table and danced. "Miss," David said, clearing his throat, "I have to ask, what you did back there, under the table, that was That was extraordinary. Sarah shrugged. I have a daughter. I know what it's like when the world feels too big and too scary. Sometimes you just need someone to be silly with you. But the dancing, David pressed, it was like you knew exactly what to do. Sarah's smile faltered slightly. I used to be a dancer, she said. Professional, before Madison was born. What happened? Life happened, Sarah said simply. But I still believe in the power of movement. Dance is communication. It's emotion. It's a way of expressing things that words cannot capture. She looked at Ethan. And sometimes, it's a way of being brave when you feel like you cannot be. Ethan finished his milkshake. When can we come back? He asked his father. David blinked. Ethan never wanted to go anywhere, ever. Whenever you want, David said. We can come back whenever you want. Can Sarah be here? Ethan asked. I work every day except Tuesday and Thursday, Sarah said. So any other day, I'll be here. Tomorrow? Ethan asked hopefully. David looked at his son, at the light in his eyes that had been missing for so long, at the way he held Sarah's hand like she was a lifeline. Tomorrow, as David agreed, we will be here tomorrow. This story is already touching hearts around the world. If it is touching yours, the Super Thanks button below is a way to support more content like this. Every contribution helps bring these stories to life. They came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Within a week, it had become a routine. David would bring Ethan to the diner in the afternoon, and after the lunch rush, Sarah would serve them, then sit and talk while Ethan ate. Sometimes they talked about books, sometimes about space, sometimes about nothing at all, but always me, at some point. Sarah would dance. Just small things at first. A twirl while carrying a plate, a shimmy while refilling water glasses, a silly wiggle that made Ethan laugh. And slowly, Ethan started to join in. A finger wave here, a shoulder shake there, small movements that grew bigger over time. David watched it all with a mixture of hope and heartache. Hope because his son was coming alive again. Heartache because it had taken a stranger to do what David himself could not. One day, about 2 weeks into their routine, Sarah brought her daughter to work. Madison was 4 years old with a riot of curly brown hair and, just as Sarah had said, one blue eye and one green. She looked at Ethan with open curiosity. Your face looks different, she announced matter-of-factly. Ethan tensed. David started to intervene, but Madison continued. It looks like a dragon breathed on you. That is so cool. I love dragons. Ethan stared at her. No one had ever said his scars were cool before. Did it hurt? Madison asked. Yes, Ethan said quietly. A lot. I fell off my bike once and it hurt a lot, Madison said. I cried for like 1,000,000 hours. Did you cry? Yes. That's okay. Crying is good. Mommy says crying is how you let the sad out so there is room for happy. Ethan considered this wisdom. Your mom is really smart. I know, Madison said proudly. She is the smartest person in the whole world. Also, she can dance really, really good. She turned to Sarah. Mommy, can you show Oliver the spinny thing? Sarah laughed. The spinny thing? You mean a pirouette? Yeah, the spinny thing. Sarah looked around the diner. It was nearly empty. Just a few customers at distant tables. Okay, she said. Just one. She moved to an open space near their booth. She took a breath, and then she spun. It was not just a spin. It was art, even in her waitress uniform, even in practical shoes. Sarah moved like she was made of light and music. The pirouette was perfect, flowing into a small leap, then a graceful landing. Ethan's mouth fell open. David's heart stopped. Wow, Ethan breathed. Sarah bowed with a flourish. Thank you. Thank you. I will be here all week. Can you teach me? Ethan asked suddenly. David expected Sarah to hedge, to say maybe, to point out that Ethan had never danced before, that his scars made certain movements painful, that it would be difficult. Instead, she said, "Absolutely. When do you want to start?" "Right now," Ethan said. He stood up from the booth and he looked at his father. "Dad, can I?" David's vision blurred with tears. His son, who had not voluntarily moved his body in 3 years, who had hidden from the world behind masks and walls, who had flinched from every touch, was asking to dance. "Yes," David managed. "Yes, and you can." Sarah held out her hand to Ethan. He took it. "First thing," she said. "Dancing isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. It's about feeling the music in your body and letting it move you." "But there's no music," Ethan said. "There is always music," Sarah replied. "You just have to listen for it." She hummed a soft melody. A lullaby, maybe. Something gentle and slow. "Now," she said, "just sway, side to side. Feel your body move." Ethan swayed, stiff at first, awkward, but moving. "Perfect," Sarah said. "Now close your eyes." Ethan hesitated. Then he closed his eyes. "Feel the movement," Sarah continued. "Feel how your body wants to go. Don't think. Just feel." Ethan swayed. And slowly, his stiffness melted away. His movements became more fluid, more natural. Madison clapped her hands. "You are doing it. Ethan, you're dancing." Ethan's eyes opened. He looked at his arms, moving in gentle arcs, at his feet, shifting on the floor, at his body, doing something he had never thought possible. And then he smiled, a real, genuine, full smile that lit up his whole face, scars and all. David covered his mouth with his hand. Tears streamed down his cheeks. His son, Ethan, was dancing. His son was smiling. His son was alive. In a way he hadn't been for 3 years. And it was all because of a waitress who had crawled under a table and refused to see a freak. The first month was transformative. Ethan, who had barely left his room for 3 years, now begged to go to the diner every day. He practiced the moves Sarah taught him at home, in front of his bedroom mirror, over and over, until he got them right. His child psychologist was amazed. "Whatever you're doing," she told David, "keep doing it. He is making more progress in weeks than he has in years." David didn't tell her about Sarah. He wasn't sure why. Maybe because he didn't want to share this miracle. Maybe because he was afraid that if he tried to analyze it, it would disappear. Or maybe because he was starting to feel something for Sarah that went beyond gratitude. It was the way she looked at Ethan. Not with pity, not with clinical detachment, but with genuine affection. Like he was just a kid, like his scars didn't matter, like he was worth knowing. It was the way she moved through the world, with grace and strength, and an unshakable optimism. That seemed impossible for someone who worked double shifts at a family diner while raising a daughter alone. It was the way she laughed, the way she danced, the way she made everything feel lighter just by being there. David Walker, tech entrepreneur, was falling for a waitress, and he had absolutely no idea what to do about it. One evening, after the diner had closed, Sarah was teaching Ethan a simple waltz. David watched from a booth, pretending to answer emails on his phone. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, Sarah counted, leading Ethan in a slow box step. Very good. Now try to feel the rhythm, not just count it. It's hard, Ethan said. Everything worth doing is hard at first, Sarah said. But you are getting better every day, Ethan beamed. Madison, who had been coloring at a nearby table, looked up. Mommy, is Ethan your boyfriend now? Sarah laughed. No, honey. Ethan is my student and my friend. But you dance with him every day, Madison pointed out, and you only dance with people you love. Sarah's cheeks flushed slightly. I love Ethan like a friend. That's different from boyfriend love. Oh. Madison went back to coloring. Okay. David found himself oddly disappointed by Sarah's answer, which was ridiculous. She was talking about an 8-year-old. Of course she loved Ethan like a friend, but part of him wondered if she could ever love anyone differently. After Ethan finished his lesson, David approached Sarah while she was wiping down tables. Ms. Torres, he said. Sarah looked up. Please call me Sarah. Ms. Torres makes me feel like I'm in trouble. Sarah, David corrected himself. I wanted to ask you something. Sure. What's up? David hesitated. In the boardroom. He was confident, commanding. He made billion-dollar decisions without breaking a sweat, but standing in front of this woman, he felt like a nervous teenager. I'd like to hire you, he said. Sarah blinked. Hire me. As a private dance instructor for Ethan. He has made so much progress with you. I want it to continue. I would pay you whatever you want. Triple your salary here. More. Sarah set down her rag. Mr. Walker. David. David, she said. I appreciate the offer. Really. But I can't accept it. Why not? Because Ethan doesn't need a paid instructor, Sarah said. He needs a friend. The moment money gets involved, this becomes a job, a transaction, and that's not what he needs. David frowned. But you work here. This is a job. This is different, Sarah said. Here, I'm just Sarah. Ethan comes to see me because he wants to, not because someone's paying for it. That's important. But I want to help you, David said. You work double shifts. You're raising a daughter alone. Let me do something. Sarah smiled softly. You want to help me? Keep bringing Ethan. Keep letting him dance. Keep being the kind of father who would crawl under a table for his kid. She touched his arm gently. That's all the payment I need. David looked at her hand on his arm, at her kind eyes, at the strength and grace that radiated from every part of her. Sarah, he said quietly, can I ask you something else? Of course. Would you have dinner with me? Not as Ethan's father, not as your customer, just as David. Sarah's smile faltered. Her hand dropped from his arm. David, she said, I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Because you're a tech entrepreneur, Sarah said simply, and I'm a waitress. We live in different worlds. Whatever you think you feel. It's probably just gratitude. It's not gratitude, David said firmly. I know the difference. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, ask me again in a month. If you still feel the same way, we'll talk. A month? A month? David nodded slowly. Okay, a month. Sarah smiled. Now go. Take your son home. He has a lot of practicing to do. David gathered Ethan, who was reluctant to leave as always. As they walked to the car, Ethan looked up at him. Dad, are you in love with Sarah? David nearly tripped. What? No. Why would you say that? Because you look at her the way you used to look at Mom, Ethan said matter-of-factly, like she's the son. David had no response to that, because his son was absolutely right. 2 months passed. Ethan's transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The boy who had hidden from the world now walked into the diner with his head held high. He still wore his mask sometimes, but less and less frequently. He had started talking to other customers, smiling at strangers, laughing at jokes, and he danced. Every afternoon after the lunch rush, Sarah would push aside tables and create a makeshift dance floor. Ethan would take his position and they would practice. Waltzes, simple ballet positions, contemporary movements that let him express what words could not. Madison had become Ethan's unofficial dance partner for the simpler routines. The two children had formed an unlikely bond. Madison with her different-colored eyes and fearless personality. Ethan with his scars and quiet strength. Together, they were magical. David watched it all with a heart so full. It sometimes felt like it might burst, and he counted the days, until he could ask Sarah to dinner again. One afternoon, David arrived at the diner to find a commotion. A woman he didn't recognize was arguing with Sarah at the counter. She was tall, elegant, dressed in designer clothes that cost more than most people made in a month, and she looked furious. "This is absurd," the woman was saying. "You can't just teach anyone to dance. You need credentials, certifications. You're putting that child at risk." "I'm not teaching professionally," Sarah replied calmly. "I'm teaching a friend. There's no risk." "No risk?" The woman laughed. "A woman with no training, teaching a traumatized child. The liability alone should shut this place down." David's blood ran cold. He knew that voice. "Victoria," he said, stepping forward. "What are you doing here?" Victoria Ashford turned to face her brother. The coldness in her eyes was familiar. It had been there since they were children, competing for their parents' approval. "David," she said, "I've been looking for you. Imagine my surprise when I discovered you've been bringing Ethan to some hole-in-the-wall diner instead of keeping him in therapy." "He is in therapy, Bo," David said. "This is in addition to therapy." "This?" Victoria gestured dismissively at Sarah. "A waitress. Playing dance teacher. This is what you call help." David stepped between his sister and Sarah. "It's none of your business." "It's absolutely my business." Victoria's voice was ice. "Ethan is my nephew, and I'm concerned about his welfare." "Since when?" David demanded. "You visited him twice in 3 years. Twice." "Because you made it impossible," Victoria snapped. "You shut everyone out after Elena died. You hid that boy away like he was something to be ashamed of. I was protecting him. Thought you were isolating him." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "And now you're exposing him to God knows what influences. An uneducated waitress? A diner full of strangers? Do you have any idea what could happen?" "What could happen is exactly what has happened," David said. "He's getting better. He's coming out of his shell. He's dancing and laughing and living again, for the first time in 3 years." Victoria shook her head. "You always were naive, David. You see what you want to see. But I see the truth. And what truth is that?" She glanced at Sarah with barely concealed contempt. "That woman is using Ethan to get to you, to get to your money. It's a classic gold digger play, and you're too love-struck to see it." Sarah stiffened. "Excuse me?" "I'm sorry. But did I ask you to speak?" Victoria did not even look at her. "I'm having a conversation with my brother." David's hands clenched into fists. "Don't talk to her like that." "I'll talk however I please." Victoria drew herself up. "David, I'm warning you, if you don't end this circus, I'll be forced to take action." "What action?" "I'll petition for guardianship of Ethan." The words hung in the air like a grenade about to explode. "You wouldn't," David said slowly. "I would." Victoria's smile was cold. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. You're clearly not making sound decisions for that child. He needs structure, proper care, not whatever this is." She gestured at the diner one final time. "You have 1 week, David. End this, or I will." She swept out of the diner, leaving devastation in her wake. David stood frozen. His heart was pounding. His mind was racing. Then Sarah's voice, and soft and steady, cut through the chaos. "David, look at me." He turned. She was pale, but calm. "She can't really do that." Can she? Sarah asked. Take Ethan. She can try, David said. His voice was hollow. She has money, connections, and she's right that I've been keeping Ethan isolated. A judge might see that as a red flag, but he's thriving now. Anyone can see that. Victoria doesn't care about thriving. David ran his hand through his hair. She cares about control. She's always wanted what I have. The company, the money, now Ethan. So what do we do? David looked at her. This isn't your fight, Sarah. I'm sorry she dragged you into this. You don't have to be involved. Sarah stepped closer. David, I crawled under a table for that boy. I've spent 2 months teaching him to dance, watching him bloom, falling in love with his stupid jokes and his serious eyes and his brave heart. I'm already involved. David felt something shift in his chest. You said. "Tired falling in love," he said quietly. Sarah flushed. I meant I love him like I didn't mean. Sarah. She stopped. I'm not going to wait another month, David said. I know what I feel, and I think you feel it too. Sarah was quiet. Her eyes searched his face. David, she said finally, your sister just threatened to take your son. This is not the time for romance. This is exactly the time. David took her hands. Because if I've learned anything from losing Eleanor, it's that time is never guaranteed. You can't wait for the perfect moment. There is no perfect moment. There is only now. He looked into her eyes. I'm falling in love with you, Sarah Torres. Not because you're beautiful, although you are. Not because you're kind, although you're that too. I'm falling in love with you because you saw my son when no one else would, because you danced under a table to help a stranger, because you make the world seem brighter just by being in it. Sarah's eyes were wet. I'm not the kind of woman you're supposed to be with, she whispered. I'm a single mom waitress with nothing but debt and dreams, and I'm a grieving widower tech entrepreneur with nothing but guilt and ghosts, David replied. We're both a mess, but maybe we can be a mess together. Sarah laughed. A wet, surprised laugh. That's not romantic at all, she said. I never said I was good at romance. Sarah shook her head, and then, before David could say anything else, she kissed him. It was a soft kiss, brief, but it changed everything. Okay, she said when they broke apart. We'll be a mess together. David smiled. The first genuine smile in a long time, and together, they would face whatever Victoria threw at them. The next week was chaos. Victoria made good on her threat. She filed an emergency petition for guardianship, claiming David was mentally unstable and making decisions that endangered Ethan. The evidence she presented was damning, at least on paper. David's isolation of Ethan for 3 years, the lack of formal homeschooling, the sudden introduction of an unqualified caregiver in the form of Sarah. David's lawyers worked around the clock. They gathered statements from Ethan's child psychologist, documenting his remarkable progress. They compiled records showing Ethan's steady improvement since starting dance lessons with Sarah. They found character witnesses willing to testify to David's devotion as a father. But Victoria had connections, and she was willing to use them. She leaked the story to the press. Tech entrepreneur's scarred son hidden for years. Now he's dancing with a waitress. The headlines were everywhere. The tabloids. They were relentless. They splashed photos of Ethan entering the diner, his scarred face front and center. Then they dug into Sarah's past, her abandoned dreams of Broadway, her life as a single mom. Gold digger targets grieving tech entrepreneur. That was a headline. And another, the waitress who wants to be a princess. Is this love or just a lottery ticket? It was brutal. It was relentless. And it was exactly what Victoria wanted. David tried his best to shield Ethan from it all, but the kid was sharp. He knew something was wrong, that dark clouds were gathering. "Dad," Ethan asked one evening, his voice small, "why are people taking pictures of us?" David knelt down, meeting his son's gaze. "Because some people are just, well, they're nosy, kiddo. They thrive on other people's business." He paused. "But it doesn't matter, Ethan. You and me, we're okay, right?" Ethan hesitated. "And Sarah?" "Sarah too, buddy." Ethan nodded, a flicker of relief in his eyes. "Good, because I really don't want to stop dancing." "You won't have to stop," David promised, squeezing his son's hand. "I'll make sure of it." But privately, he wasn't so sure. Victoria's lawyers were sharks, circling. The court date was looming, closer and closer. And the media frenzy? It was only fueling the fire. Then Sarah did something completely unexpected, something that stunned everyone. She called a press conference. David only found out about it when he arrived at the diner and saw a sea of reporters blocking the entrance. "What in the world is going on?" he demanded, pushing his way through the crowd. Inside, Sarah stood behind the counter, not in her usual apron but dressed in a simple but elegant dress. Her hair cascaded down her shoulders. Her chin was held high. Madison sat quietly in a nearby booth, coloring in a book, seemingly unfazed by the chaos erupting around her. Reporters shoved, jostled for position, shouting questions all at once. "Miss Torres, is it true you're dating David Walker? Are you after his money? Are you some kind of social climber? What qualifications do you have to work with his son? Are you even certified?" Sarah raised her hand, silencing the cacophony. "I'd like to make a statement," she said. Her voice, it was calm, strong, yet it carried throughout the diner. "My name is Sarah Torres. I am a waitress. I am a single mother. And yes, I have been teaching Ethan Walker to dance." She paused, her eyes meeting those of the reporters, even the cameras. "You want to know my qualifications?" She let out a short, humorless breath. "I was a professional dancer before I had my daughter. I trained at Juilliard. I was offered positions with the New York City Ballet, the American Ballet Theatre. I gave it all up when I got pregnant because the father left. And I had absolutely no support system." She looked directly into the lenses, her voice filled with conviction. "I am not ashamed of that. I am proud of it. I chose my daughter over my career. I worked double shifts to give her a good life. And when a scared little boy crawled under a table in my section, I did what any decent person would do. I helped him." The reporters were silent now, hanging on every single word, captivated. "Ethan Walker is not a story," Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength. "He is not a headline. He is an 8-year-old boy who lost his mother in a tragic accident and was badly burned. He is brave, he is funny, and he is incredibly talented. And he deserves to be seen as a person, not a spectacle, not some kind of sideshow freak." She straightened her shoulders, her gaze unwavering. "I am not after David Walker's money. I refused payment when he offered. I teach Ethan because I see myself in him, because I know what it's like to be judged for things you cannot control, because dance saved me once, and I believe, with all my heart, it can help save him too." She turned, looking directly at David, who had moved to stand protectively beside her. "If that makes me a gold digger in your eyes, and then your eyes are broken." She faced the cameras again. "That's all I have to say. Please, just leave us in peace." She walked away from the counter, gently took Madison's hand and disappeared into the kitchen, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. The diner was deathly quiet. Then, slowly, hesitantly, the reporters began to file out. Some were still snapping pictures, but the frenzy had diminished. Something in Sarah's words had reached them, had gotten through. David followed her into the kitchen, his heart pounding. "That was," he started, completely speechless. "Stupid?" Sarah was shaking just a little. "Impulsive. I know. I couldn't let them keep writing those things about you, about Ethan. It was incredible," David said, his voice thick with emotion. He pulled her into a tight hug. "You were incredible, Sarah." Sarah leaned into him, finding comfort in his embrace. "I just told the truth," she whispered. "Sometimes that's the bravest thing you can do," he replied softly. They stood there, holding each other, while the world outside had continued to spin. The court date was not just 3 days away, but for now, in this moment, they had each other, and that would have to be enough. The day of the court hearing arrived, grey and overcast, matching the knot of anxiety in David's stomach. David sat in the courtroom with his high-powered lawyers, his hands clasped so tightly that his knuckles were white. Across the aisle, Victoria sat with her legal team, looking polished, cold, and utterly confident. Sarah wasn't allowed inside. She wasn't officially part of the case, but she was waiting anxiously in the hallway, pacing, checking her phone every few seconds for updates. The judge was an older man, with stern eyes and a reputation for being meticulous. He listened intently as Victoria's lawyers presented their case. They painted a picture of a father in crisis, a man so consumed by grief that he had effectively hidden his child away from the world, a man who had rejected the advice of qualified professionals in favor of a random diner waitress, a man who was clearly unfit to make decisions for his son. Then it was David's turn. His lawyers presented evidence of Ethan's progress, the glowing reports from the child psychologist, the heartfelt testimonials from the diner staff who had witnessed his transformation, the letter from Ethan's school confirming that he would be ready to return next fall. But Victoria's lawyers were ready with their rebuttals. They questioned the objectivity of the therapist. They dismissed the diner witnesses as biased. They pointed out that the school hadn't actually seen or evaluated Ethan recently. It was a battle, a legal chess match, and David, he wasn't sure who was winning. He felt like he was drowning, and the shore was miles away. Then, the judge did something completely unexpected. "I would like to speak with the child," he announced, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Your Honor," Victoria's lead lawyer began, her voice dripping with protest, "that is highly unusual, if not unprecedented." "I am aware," the judge replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "But this case is ultimately about Ethan Walker's welfare, and I would like to hear from him directly, with a child advocate present, of course." David's heart stopped. Ethan had never testified in any kind of official proceeding. The stress, the scrutiny, it could undo all the progress he had made. But before he could object, Ethan's voice, clear and surprisingly strong, came from the back of the courtroom. "I want to talk," he declared. Everyone turned. Ethan was standing in the doorway. He wasn't wearing his mask. His scars were visible for all to see, and he was holding Sarah's hand. "I know I'm supposed to wait outside," Sarah said quickly, her voice laced with anxiety. "But he really wanted to come in. He said he had something important to say." The judge studied them for a long, silent moment. Then he nodded, slowly. "Bring the child forward," he instructed. Ethan walked down the aisle, still holding Sarah's hand. When they reached the front, Sarah gave his hand a reassuring squeeze and stepped back, allowing him to face the judge alone. "Hello, Ethan," the judge said gently, his voice kind. "Do you know why you're here today?" "Because Aunt Victoria wants to take me away from Dad," Ethan said. His voice was quiet, but steady, filled with an inner resolve that belied his young age. "That's one way to put it," the judge replied, acknowledging the boy's perspective. "Can you tell me about your life with your father?" Ethan thought about it, searching for the right words. "After Mom died," he said, his voice catching slightly, I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to go outside or see people or even talk. I was scared. All the time, Scared people would look at me and see a freak, a monster. The judge nodded slowly. Go on, Ethan. Dad, David, tried to help. He got me doctors, child psychologists, but nothing worked. I just kept being scared, all the time. Ethan looked at Sarah, a silent thank you in his eyes. Then I met her. The waitress? The judge asked, a hint of skepticism in his voice. Her name is Sarah, Ethan said firmly. She's not just a waitress. She's my friend, my teacher. She is the bravest person I know. Why do you say that, son? Because when everyone else looked away from me, she looked right at me, Ethan explained. She didn't pretend my scars weren't there. She didn't treat me like I was fragile. She just saw me, the real me. He turned to face the courtroom, his voice filled with newfound confidence. She taught me to dance, he continued, his voice growing stronger. She said my body isn't something to hide, it's something to celebrate. It tells my story, and my story is important. He looked pointedly at Aunt Victoria. Aunt Victoria doesn't understand. She thinks I need to be fixed. But I'm not broken. I'm just different. And different is okay. He faced the judge again, pleading in his eyes. Please, don't take me away from my dad. He loves me. He has always loved me. He just didn't know how to help, until Sarah showed him. His voice cracked with emotion. She showed all of us. The courtroom was silent. You could hear a pin drop. The judge cleared his throat, a slight cough echoing in the stillness. He shuffled through his papers, then looked directly at Ethan. Young man, he said, his voice softened. You are remarkably articulate for your age. Sarah says words matter, Ethan replied, a small smile gracing his lips. So I try to use them. Carefully. The judge almost smiled, a flicker of warmth in his eyes. I would like to see something, he said, leaning forward. I understand you have been learning to dance. Would you be willing to show the court? Ethan's eyes went wide. Here? Now? If you are comfortable, son. Ethan looked at Sarah. She nodded encouragingly, a silent message of support passing between them. Okay, he said, his voice barely a whisper. But Sarah has to dance with me. The judge gestured toward the open space in front of the bench, a slight smile on his face. Please. Sarah stepped forward. Her eyes locked on Ethan's. She took his hand, her touch reassuring. They didn't have music. They didn't have a proper dance floor. They were in the middle of a courtroom, with dozens of eyes watching. But none of that mattered. Sarah hummed softly, the same lullaby she had hummed that first day at the diner, and they began to move. It was a simple dance, a waltz, with modifications Sarah had designed for Ethan's range of motion. They stepped and swayed and turned, moving in perfect harmony. A perfect team. Ethan's scars caught the light. His movements weren't perfect. But there was something about the way he danced that was unmistakably beautiful. Joy radiated from him, freedom, the expression of a soul that had finally found its voice. David watched through tears, his heart swelling with pride. His son was dancing, in a courtroom, in front of strangers, without his mask. His son was dancing. When they finished, the courtroom was silent. Then someone in the gallery started clapping. Tentative at first, then another, then another. Victoria sat stone-faced as applause filled the room. The judge raised his hand for silence, his expression unreadable. Thank you, Ethan, he said, his voice filled with emotion. That was extraordinary. Ethan beamed, his face alight with happiness. I would like to take a brief recess, the judge continued. We will resume in 1 hour, with my ruling. As the courtroom emptied, David rushed to Ethan and swept him into his arms. You were amazing, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. So amazing. Did I help? Ethan asked, his voice muffled against his father's shoulder. David looked at Sarah over his son's shoulder. She was crying silently, a smile on her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You helped," David said, squeezing Ethan tighter. "More than you know." The hour passed like an eternity. David paced the hallway, his nerves on edge. Sarah sat with Ethan and Madison, the two children playing a clapping game to pass the time and ease the tension. Victoria had disappeared into a conference room with her lawyers, plotting her next move. Finally, the bailiff called everyone back, the sound echoing in the hallway. The judge took his seat, his expression serious. He looked at his papers for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice resonating in the silent courtroom. "This case has presented me with a difficult decision," he began, his voice filled with gravitas. "On one hand, we have concerns about a child who was isolated for 3 years following a traumatic event. On the other hand, we have evidence of remarkable progress through unconventional means." He looked directly at Victoria, his gaze unwavering. "Miss Ashford, your concern for your nephew is noted. However, I find that your motivations are not purely altruistic. The evidence suggests a pattern of estrangement from the family, coupled with a sudden interest, coinciding with business disputes with your brother." Victoria's face hardened, her jaw clenched tight. The judge continued, turning to David, his voice softening. "Mr. Walker, you clearly love your son. Your methods of coping with his trauma were perhaps misguided, but they came from a place of protection, not neglect. And the progress Ethan has made in the past 2 months speaks for itself." He looked at Sarah, his eyes filled with understanding. "Miss Torres, you have no formal credentials as a dance therapist. By traditional measures, you were unqualified to work with a traumatized child." Sarah's heart sank, her hopes plummeting. "But qualifications are not everything," the judge continued, his voice rising with conviction. "Sometimes the most important skill is simply showing up, being present, seeing a child for who they are, not what they have been through." He straightened his papers, his gaze sweeping over the courtroom. "It is the ruling of this court that David Walker retains full custody of his son Ethan. The petition for guardianship filed by Victoria Ashford is denied." David's knees nearly buckled with relief, his heart soaring with joy. "Furthermore," the judge added, a hint of a smile playing on his lips, "I am recommending that Miss Torres be recognized as a therapeutic support person in Ethan's care plan. Whatever she is doing, and it is working. I see no reason to disrupt it." He banged his gavel, the sound echoing through the courtroom. "Case dismissed." Ethan cheered, jumping up and down with excitement. Madison joined him, not entirely sure what had happened, but happy anyway, celebrating her friend's victory. David pulled Sarah into a hug, Ethan sandwiched between them, a family united. "We did it," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. "We did it," Sarah agreed, tears streaming down her face. Victoria stormed out of the courtroom without a word, her face a mask of fury. Her lawyers trailed behind her, already talking about possible appeals, their voices hushed. But none of that mattered. What mattered was this moment, this family, this victory. Against fear, against judgment, against everyone who had said Ethan would never heal. They had won. 6 months after the court hearing, David proposed. They were at the diner. Of course they were at the diner. It was where everything had started, where Ethan had hidden under a table and found a friend, where David had found something he thought was lost forever, hope. The diner was closed for a private event, just the 4 of them, David, Ethan, Sarah, and Madison, plus the owner of the diner, a kindly old woman who had agreed to keep the doors locked and the kitchen running for one special night. "Dad," Ethan whispered loudly, his excitement bubbling over, "when are you going to ask her?" "Shh," David hissed back, trying to suppress a laugh. "You're ruining the surprise." "But you've been nervous all day," Ethan insisted. "Just do it already." Sarah was watching this exchange with amusement, her eyes twinkling with happiness. "Something tells me there's a secret I don't know about." David sighed dramatically. "Ethan, you are the absolute worst at keeping secrets. I'm 8. I'm supposed to be bad at secrets." David laughed despite himself. Then he stood up from the table. "Sarah," he said, "the first time I walked into this diner, I was broken. My son was broken. I had given up on ever feeling normal again." Sarah's eyes widened. "Then you crawled under a table and danced with a scared little boy." David continued, "And you changed everything. You showed Ethan that his scars didn't define him. You showed me that it was possible to love again after loss. You showed both of us that family isn't about blood or circumstance. It's about the people who show up." He got down on one knee. "Sarah Torres, waitress extraordinaire, dance teacher, best secret keeper, despite Ethan's claims otherwise." Sarah laughed through tears. "Will you marry me?" David asked. "Will you become part of our family? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you?" He opened a small box. Inside was a ring, not ostentatious, not flashy. A simple band with a stone that matched the blue-green of Madison's mismatched eyes. "A ring as unique as you are," David said. Sarah stared at the ring. Then at David. Then at the two children watching with bated breath. "Yes," she said. 1,000 times, yes." David slid the ring onto her finger. Then he stood and kissed her while Ethan and Madison cheered. "Finally," Ethan said. "Dad's been carrying that ring around for weeks. I was getting tired of pretending I didn't know." "You knew?" David asked. "I'm 8. Not stupid," Ethan said. "You are terrible at keeping secrets." The wedding was held 3 months later. It took place in the garden of the Walker estate, an outdoor ceremony, simple and elegant, with fairy lights strung through the trees and flowers everywhere. Sarah wore a flowing white dress that moved like water when she walked. David wore a suit that made him look like the handsome tech entrepreneur he was. But when they looked at each other, they weren't tech entrepreneur and waitress. They were just two people, in love. Ethan was the ring bearer. He walked down the aisle without his mask, his scars visible for all to see. He carried the rings on a small pillow, moving with a grace that came from months of dance practice. Madison was the flower girl. She threw petals with the same aggressive enthusiasm our golden retriever Gus showed chasing squirrels, covering the ground in a thick layer of flowers. More is better, she explained to anyone who would listen. The ceremony was short and sweet. They had written their own vows. "Sarah," David said, "I spent 3 years thinking I would never be happy again, that my son would never heal. That love was something that happened to other people, not to me." He took her hands. "Then you crawled under a diner table and changed everything. You taught my son to dance. You taught me to hope. You showed us both that the scars we carry don't define us, that we are more than our worst moments. That beauty can be found in the most unexpected places." His voice cracked. "I promise to love you for all your days and mine. I promise to dance with you in kitchens and living rooms and diner floors. I promise to be the partner you deserve and the father Madison needs." He squeezed her hands. "I promise to keep choosing you every day for the rest of my life." Sarah wiped her eyes. "David," she said, 5 months ago, I was a single mom working double shifts, trying to make ends meet, wondering if life would ever get easier." She smiled. "Then a scared little boy hid under my table, and I did what I had always done. I danced. I didn't know it would lead to this, and to you, to a family I never imagined I could have." She looked at Ethan and Madison. "I fell in love with your son before I fell in love with you," she admitted. "He showed me that courage comes in unexpected forms, that scars can be beautiful, that the measure of a person isn't how they look, but how they love." She turned back to David. "And you. You showed me that it's possible to build a new life from the ashes of the old, that grief and joy can coexist, that love, real love, is worth fighting for. She squeezed his hands. I promise to dance with you through good times and bad. I promise to love your son as my own. I promise to face whatever comes with the same stubborn refusal to give up that made me crawl under that table. Her voice cracked. I promise to keep choosing you. Every day. For the rest of my life. The officiant smiled. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. David pulled Sarah into a kiss. The guests cheered. You, Ethan and Madison said in unison. Then they looked at each other and laughed. And now, the officiant announced, the new family has prepared something special. Music started playing. A soft, beautiful melody that Sarah had selected herself. David looked at her questioningly. You didn't think I'd get married without a dance, did you? She asked. She took his hand and led him to the small dance floor that had been set up. I don't really know how to dance, David admitted. That's okay, Sarah said. I'll lead. They began to sway. David was awkward at first, stiff and uncertain. But Sarah guided him, just as she had guided Ethan, slowly. He relaxed. His movements became more natural, more fluid. Then Ethan stepped onto the dance floor. He had been practicing this for weeks. A special routine he and Sarah had choreographed together. Something to surprise his father at the wedding. He began to dance. It wasn't a simple waltz. It was contemporary, expressive, full of leaps and turns and movements that told a story. The story of a boy who had been burned and broken. The story of a father who had tried to protect him from the world. The story of a woman who had crawled under a table and changed everything. Ethan danced his heart out. Every movement was precise, passionate, beautiful. David stopped dancing with Sarah. He just stood there, watching his son, tears streaming down his face. Ethan finished with a final pose. Arms outstretched, scars visible, smile radiant. The guests erupted in applause. David pulled his son into a fierce hug. He could barely speak. That was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. I've been practicing, Ethan said. Sarah helped. David looked at Sarah, his wife, the woman who had given his son back to him. I love you, he said. I love you too, Sarah replied. Both of you. Madison tugged on Sarah's dress and me, Mommy, and you. Sarah laughed, scooping her daughter into her arms. Always you. They stood there, the four of them, in the middle of the dance floor, a family formed not by blood, but by choice, by love, by the stubborn refusal to give up. If you've ever felt like you'd never heal, thought Sarah, looking at her new family, remember this. Healing doesn't mean the scars disappear. It means you learn to dance with them, to find your rhythm alongside them. 5 years after the wedding, Ethan stood on a stage, bathed in the spotlight. He was 13 now, tall, confident, with the same strong features as his father, David. His scars were still visible, a roadmap of his past. But he had long since stopped trying to hide them. He wore them like badges of honor. This was his first major dance performance, a contemporary piece he had choreographed himself, a story told through movement, inspired by his own journey, from fear to finally finding freedom. In the audience, David and Sarah sat with Madison, who was now 9. Beside them was a new face to the family, a 3-year-old boy named Daniel, their biological son. He was a perfect blend of both his parents, a little walker through and through. The music started. A pulsing emotional score filled the theater. Ethan began to dance. It was extraordinary. Years of practice, of passion, of pushing through the pain and fear, had all culminated in this single breathtaking moment. He moved like water and fire combined, both fierce and gentle, broken, yet whole. The audience was captivated, spellbound by his performance. They were witnessing something truly special when he finished. The standing ovation lasted for what felt like an eternity. Minutes blurred into a chorus of cheers and applause. People were crying, clapping, screaming his name. Ethan bowed. Then he looked directly at Sarah, his eyes locking with hers. "This is for you," he mouthed, a silent thank you that spoke volumes. Sarah was sobbing, tears streaming down her face. David had his arm around her. His own eyes were glistening with unshed tears. "You did this," David whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved him." Sarah shook her head, a gentle smile gracing her lips. "He saved himself. I just showed him how to start." After the performance, Ethan ran backstage and was immediately swarmed by his family. "You were incredible!" Madison shrieked, throwing her arms around him. "Ollie danced good," Daniel added, clapping his tiny hands. David lifted his son off the ground, something he could barely do anymore given how much Ethan had grown. "Your mother would be so proud," he said quietly, his voice cracking with emotion. "So incredibly proud." Ethan's eyes were wet. He blinked back tears. "I know," he said. "I felt her watching." Sarah joined the hug, her arms wrapped around them both. She didn't need words. She never had. Her presence said everything. That night, at a celebratory dinner at a local diner, Ethan made an announcement, his voice filled with determination. "I have decided what I want to do with my life," he said, all eyes on him. Everyone looked at him, anticipation hanging in the air. "I want to start a dance program for kids with visible differences, burn survivors, kids with scars. Anyone who has ever been told they are too broken to be beautiful." He looked at Sarah, gratitude shining in his eyes. "I want to do for them what you did for me. Show them that their bodies are not things to hide. That dance is for everyone. That scars are just stories, waiting to be told." Sarah's heart swelled with pride. She could barely contain her joy. "That is amazing, Ethan," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I will help you however I can." "We all will," David added. "Whatever you need." Ethan smiled. That smile that had been so rare for so long, now given freely, illuminating his face. "I already have the perfect name for it," he said, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "What?" Madison asked, bouncing with excitement. "The Under-the-Table Dance Company," Ethan said. "For all the kids who need someone to crawl under and dance with them." Sarah laughed through her tears. The name resonated deeply with her. "It is perfect," she said, wiping her eyes. And it was. Perfect. Just like their family. Just like their love. Just like the improbable, impossible, beautiful life they had built together. All because a waitress had seen a scared little boy and done the only thing she knew how to do: dance. What would you have done in Sarah's position? Would you have crawled under that table? Leave your answer in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, the Super Thanks button is a way to support more content like this. Every contribution helps bring these stories of hope and healing to life, so that others might find inspiration too. The story of Ethan and Sarah proves that healing does not mean the scars disappear. It means learning to dance with them. It means finding someone who sees your pain and refuses to look away. A scared boy hid under a table. A waitress crawled in to join him, and together they danced their way to healing. That is the miracle. That is the message. That is what happens when you choose love over fear. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep dancing.